Every time I spent the night at my future in-laws' lake house, I woke up feeling like I had slept through anesthesia. Heavy, foggy limbs that refused to cooperate. My fiancé said it was the Georgia heat and the wine. Then one morning, I found my federal work tablet locked out from 14 failed biometric access attempts, a tablet I had not touched since I set it on the nightstand before dinner. Before I finish telling you what happened next, you need to know one thing about me. I am a senior clinical pharmacist at a VA medical center, and I have spent 11 years understanding exactly how sedatives behave in the human bloodstream. What was happening to me at that lake house was not the Georgia heat. My name is Amara, I am 29 years old, and I grew up in a 2-bedroom apartment in East Point, Georgia, with my mother and 2 younger brothers. She worked double shifts at a grocery store so I could go to pharmacy school. I paid off every dollar of my student loans myself. I did not grow up with a trust fund or a lake house or a last name that opened restaurant reservations. I grew up understanding that everything I wanted, I would have to earn twice as hard as everyone else just to keep. My fiancé was the kind of man who made me believe that where you came from did not define where you were going. We met at a hospital charity auction 3 years ago. He was warm, attentive, funny. He looked at me like I was the most interesting person in the room, which is a thing I had never felt before and should have asked more questions about. We got engaged 8 months ago on the rooftop of a restaurant in Midtown Atlanta, and I thought I was the luckiest woman alive. His family was a different story entirely. They owned 3 urgent care clinics across the Atlanta metro area and a commercial real estate portfolio stretching into Savannah. His mother presented herself as the gold standard of Black professional achievement in Georgia. She sat on hospital boards, chaired fundraisers, and introduced herself to strangers by listing accomplishments with the practiced ease of a woman who had rehearsed her entire life as a performance. His father was quieter but no less calculating. His sister had married a man I will call my brother-in-law, a white man who worked in what he called private equity and what I later came to understand was moving money between accounts in ways that required more explanation than he ever offered. The lake house visits began after the engagement. Every other weekend, May through September, 90 minutes north of Atlanta to Lake Lanier. The property was enormous. 5 bedrooms, a private dock, marble countertops in the kitchen that cost more than my first car. I dressed carefully, brought wine, answered every condescending question about my government salary and my little federal job with a practiced smile. I tried very hard to belong there. And every single Sunday morning, I woke up feeling like someone had poured cement into my skull while I was sleeping. I told myself it was the heat, the wine, the unfamiliar bed. My fiancé said I was overworked, anxious, that I needed to stop bringing my stress to his family's home. So I drank less, I watched what I ate, I went to bed early. The 6th visit, I found my federal tablet locked, 14 failed attempts on the biometric scanner. I had placed it on the nightstand before dinner and had not touched it since. I did not say anything to my fiancé on the drive home. I sat in the passenger seat with my sunglasses on and reconstructed the night before with the same systematic precision I use at work when I am tracing a dispensing error. Every detail, every deviation, everything that didn't fit. The vegetable bisque my future mother-in-law served me personally, hovering over my chair with that tight proprietary smile, while the catering staff served everyone else. The glass of sparkling water poured for me from a separate pitcher. The way my vision had softened at the edges within 20 minutes of finishing, my arms turning heavy and strange. I knew what benzodiazepine sedation felt like. I had administered it hundreds of times. The next morning, I called my best friend and asked her to meet me at the emergency room. I told the attending physician I suspected I had been drugged at a social gathering, and I gave them the timeline. They drew blood. The tox panel came back 48 hours later. Clonazepam, 3 times the standard therapeutic dose, enough to render a person completely unconscious for 4 to 6 hours. I sat in my car in the hospital parking garage and read the result on my phone. I read it twice. Then I set the phone, faced a seat, closed my eyes, and breathed until my hands stopped trembling. When I opened them, I was not afraid anymore. Fear had been replaced by something much quieter and much more dangerous. I went home and pulled up the activity log on my federal tablet. The DEA registered system had automatically captured the MAC addresses of every wireless device within 10 feet of the device during those failed access attempts. 3 external devices were detected. 1 fingerprint matched my future mother-in-law's smartwatch. 1 matched my brother-in-law's encrypted personal phone. One matched my future sister-in-law's device. All three of them standing over my unconscious body in the dark, trying to force my face into the biometric scanner of a federal medication dispensing system. I logged an anonymous tip with the HHS Office of Inspector General about suspicious attempted access on a DEA-registered device. Then I drafted a complete report, the tox panel results, the device logs, the MAC address data, a full written timeline, encrypted it, and attached it to a scheduled send on a dead man's switch server. I set the transmission to trigger automatically at 8 o'clock on a Saturday evening 3 weeks out. Recipient: the FBI field office in Atlanta and the HHS OIG regional director. Then I texted my fiancé and told him I missed his family and asked when we were visiting again. He responded in 4 minutes. His mother, he said, had been thinking about hosting a proper summer dinner, something more formal. His father had a business matter he wanted to discuss with me in person. Family business. I told him it sounded wonderful. The invitation arrived by text that Thursday. Formal dinner at the lake house Saturday at 6. His mother specified business casual. His father would explain the details in person. I spent the next 2 weeks getting ready in ways they were not expecting. I ordered a surveillance device, a compact high-definition camera designed to look like the decorative clasp on a thin gold belt. I tested the feed 40 times. I booked 2 licensed private security agents through a firm I trusted, instructing them to park outside the property perimeter and wait for my text. Then I bought a dress, deep burgundy, fitted, the kind I had been silently told my whole life I had no business wearing. I bought it because I had already won, and I wanted to walk into that lake house knowing it. Dinner was the usual theater. My future father-in-law held court at the head of the table. My future sister-in-law made a remark about how stable it must feel to have a government pension to fall back on. My brother-in-law laughed at everything his wife said and kept refilling his own glass. My future mother-in-law came out of the kitchen carrying my bowl of soup herself, just like always, same tight smile, same hovering. I looked at the bowl, then I pressed my hand to my stomach and told her I was coming down with something. I said the soup smelled incredible, but I was afraid to eat anything heavy. She held the smile for one more second longer than was natural. Then she recovered and called the catering staff for crackers. After dessert, my future father-in-law walked us to the living room and set a manila folder on the coffee table. He talked about my federal access, my DEA registration, the National Pharmacy Dispensing Database. He talked about a billing audit coming for 2 of their clinic NPI numbers. He called it a clerical issue. He said the right person with the right clearance could resolve it quietly. My future mother-in-law said that families protect each other. I looked at my fiancé. He was staring at the coffee table. He had known exactly what dinner was. Then my future sister-in-law held up her phone. The photographs were high resolution and carefully framed. Me lying in the guest room upstairs, dress pulled up, eyes closed. My brother-in-law pressed against me in each image, arm across my waist, face angled toward my neck. In 3 of the photos I appeared to be smiling. I knew with clinical certainty that was physically impossible given my level of sedation, which meant someone had manually arranged my face while I was unconscious. I made myself look at each one, then I set the phone back on the coffee table and asked very quietly what they needed me to do. My future father-in-law explained the terms: clear the federal billing flags on the clinic accounts, sign a non-disclosure agreement, attend their annual medical charity gala the following Saturday evening as a show of family solidarity. If I declined, the photographs would go to my DEA supervisory board, my hospital director, and every professional reference I had built over 11 years. I pressed my lips together. I let my eyes go wet. I told them I needed a week to prepare the system access safely so the modification would not trigger an automatic audit alert. They agreed. The drive home was 51 minutes. I did not turn on the radio. When I got back to my apartment, I opened my laptop and added one more document to the evidence file I had already built. Something I had found while tracing my brother-in-law's device fingerprint through the clinic's internal network earlier that week. Wire transfers. A Delaware LLC receiving regular deposits from the Atlanta Community Health Foundation, a nonprofit that provided free medication assistance to uninsured families across Fulton County. Over 14 months, my brother-in-law had moved $260,000 out of that foundation and into a personal brokerage account, where he had lost nearly all of it on leveraged options that collapsed during a market correction. He had stolen medication money from people who could not afford to be sick. under the cover of a family whose entire public identity was built on medical philanthropy. I updated the dead man's switch to include the foundation for it and confirmed the transmission time, 8 o'clock Saturday evening, the exact moment the charity gala's formal program was scheduled to begin. The gala was in Buckhead. High ceilings, 200 guests in linen and silk, the whole room smelling of eucalyptus and old money. Local politicians, hospital administrators, and the full board of the Atlanta Community Health Foundation, the very people my brother-in-law had been robbing for over a year. My fiancé met me at the door. He looked handsome and hollowed out in equal measure, and said nothing when I took his arm and smiled for the couple who stopped to congratulate us on our engagement. At 7:45, my future father-in-law gave a speech about healthcare access and community investment and family legacy, and 200 people applauded. At 8 o'clock, he called me to the stage. He told the room his future daughter-in-law, a federal pharmacist, a public servant, wanted to make a brief presentation as a gesture of her commitment to the family's mission. He said it with the confidence of a man who had already won. I plugged my encrypted drive into the event laptop. The first slide was a clean data graph, the kind I use in medication safety reports. It showed Medicare billing submissions from 2 Hargrave Clinic locations cross-referenced against the federal pharmacy dispensing records. The gap between what had been billed and what had actually been dispensed represented nearly $400,000 in fraudulent Medicaid claims over 3 years. The room went very quiet. I advanced to the second slide, wire transfer records. The Atlanta Community Health Foundation's outgoing transactions to the Delaware LLC, 14 months of transfers, $260,000, most of it liquidated and gone. Someone in the third row said my brother-in-law's name out loud, not as an accusation, just recognition, the way your brain says a word when it is trying to catch up with what your eyes are reading. The people in this room have donated to this foundation in good faith, I said into the microphone, because they believed their money was purchasing medication for families who could not afford it. I want them to know exactly where that money went instead. My future mother-in-law stood from her table and said my name in a voice designed to shatter glass. She called me hysterical, unstable, a liar, a woman who had never been good enough for her son and was now destroying her family out of spite. I pressed the spacebar. The audio recording from my gold belt clasp came through the room's speaker system at full volume. My future father-in-law's voice, measured and businesslike, describing the federal billing flags and what he needed cleared. My future mother-in-law's voice, families protect each other. My future sister-in-law's voice as she held up the phone with the photographs. The foundation board chair walked out of the room with his cell phone already at his ear. My brother-in-law moved toward the back exit at a pace that was not quite running. He made it 12 feet before 2 agents in dark suits stepped out from the corridor and stopped him. The FBI field office had received my automated transmission at 8 o'clock exactly. They had been in position for an hour. My future father-in-law was arrested at the podium. My future mother-in-law was taken into custody at her table, still insisting to the woman beside her that I was paranoid and mentally unstable, even as the agent read her rights. My future sister-in-law was arrested for conspiracy and evidence tampering. My brother-in-law was walked out in handcuffs past the full board of the foundation he had spent over a year quietly looting, including the pastor whose congregation had contributed generously to the medication fund that was now empty. I stepped away from the microphone and picked up my clutch. My fiancé was standing at the edge of the room. He looked at me the way people look at something they only understand they have lost at the exact moment it is gone. He said my name. I looked at him for a long moment. I had loved a version of him, the man from the charity auction, the man on the Midtown rooftop. That version was a very carefully constructed story, and I had believed it completely because I had wanted to. That is not a weakness. That is what it means to trust someone. I hope it was worth it, I said, not with anger, just with the clarity of someone who has already closed a door. I walked out of the Buckhead event space into the Atlanta night, past the police cruisers angled across the parking lot entrance and the cluster of guests gathering on the sidewalk, trying to understand what they had just witnessed, and I did not look back once. My future father-in-law pleaded guilty to healthcare fraud and conspiracy. My future mother-in-law received 4 years for conspiracy, obstruction, and her role in the drugging and extortion, every single charge because I had audio of her ordering every single act. My future sister-in-law received 2 years for evidence tampering and conspiracy. My brother-in-law was sentenced to 9 years for wire fraud and criminal embezzlement of charitable funds. The federal judge noted during sentencing that the particular cruelty of stealing from a medication assistance fund was an aggravating factor in the length of the sentence. The Atlanta Community Health Foundation recovered the full embezzled amount through asset forfeiture. The board voted that fall to rename the Medication Assistance Program. They did not name it after anyone who had ever been in that lake house. I still work at the VA. I still drive the same car. I still call my mother every Sunday. I received a written commendation from the OIG for my cooperation with the federal investigation, and I keep it in a kitchen drawer, not on the wall, because I did not do what I did to be celebrated. I did it because no one has the right to use another person's body or their life's work as raw material for crimes they are too cowardly to answer for themselves. If someone in your life keeps telling you that what you are feeling is not real, that you are tired, stressed, paranoid, too sensitive, trust the part of your mind that keeps quietly asking why. The fog is deliberate, and the truth, if you are patient enough to follow it, always leaves a trail. Have you ever been made to feel like you were the problem when you were the only person in the room actually paying attention? Tell me your story in the comments below. And if you believe that accountability does not stop at the front door of a beautiful house, please subscribe to Floppy Revenge for more.